times? What is the rationale for making acquisitions? Why do M&As fail? And what has been TAFE's experience with Aisha Tractors? Right? And what are some of the key learnings from this real-life case study? All right. Now, what are the factors that are providing an impetus for mergers and acquisitions globally, not just in India but globally? One of the things is demand for different products is growing at a very fast pace, and it has become critically important for companies to innovate. Okay? Because, how do you innovate? By leveraging information technology and so forth. So this has resulted in a situation where it's very difficult for a single company to focus on doing all things right. You have to deal at different levels, different dimensions. So it has become very difficult for one company to do everything right. And that is one of the things that has propelled mergers and acquisitions. So my point is that higher value creation through synergies, economies of scale, improvement in asset utilization. But the point is, this is the fact. We have seen the drivers, but nearly 60% of all M&As fail. This is, from Boston Consulting Group. This is the statistics that they they put out. So, even though we say that M&As can be a tool for value creation, but less than 50% of the deals globally create value. Okay? And do you want to do an acquisition for that purpose? Do you have a coherent strategy? What is it that you hope to achieve through this activity? That is very important. Many times, the strategy is not very clear. It is sort of reasons clearly in mind that it's going to result in ultimately in a failure. Okay. So basically, I've said here, opportunistic approach to M&A, not grounded on strong industry logic. Okay. So the second thing is inadequate fit. If you want an acquisition to be successful, there has to be a proper fit between the two firms. In fact, Peter Drucker, the great management expert, once said, in order for an acquisition to be successful, there must be a core of unity between the acquiring firm and the target company. That means there must be something in common between these two entities. That is why the failure rate is much higher for conglomerate acquisitions than for related acquisitions. Because in the case of related acquisitions, there are certain common things between the acquiring firm and the target company. Whereas conglomerate, that is, if you look at the US scenario or the European scenario, you find very few true conglomerates. Okay, but interestingly, in the Asian context, you find more conglomerates. Can you explain? I know once again I'm digressing, but can you explain to me the reasons why you find very few conglomerates in the West, but you find more conglomerates in Asia, like the chaebols of Korea, or even in the Indian context, you have many conglomerates?
The culture also not acceptable. I'll give you an example of Tata Motors, you say They had a problem initially. Synergy, the only strategy what Tata took over was how to motivate Coors employees. The entire focus was spent on huge money on trying to motivate employees of Coors.
Okay.
They brought to India, they moved from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, trying to make people feel what the Indian culture is, what we are. Then they sent back to Coors. Then the Coors employees said, we are ready to work under India. So basically, conglomerates, though they have the same thing. Tata Coors have the same problem. Even I'm talking about one more organization had started the same kind of problem, cultural differences, US and India. But it was very easy for us to have Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, along with these conglomerates we had. The culture was so common, the additions were so common. It was very easy for us to take over them. It was very difficult for US firms at one stage. And another thing, what we have video phone. When they wanted to bring in the washing machine to India, the pricing strategy also failed during that, and that was the reason why even that in 1977-78 Videocon washing machine costed 8,000. Today also it costs the same price, 7,000 to 8,000. the pricing was the same, the profitability was there, but again Videocon had to go down to few of the organizations. So somewhere or other inadequate fit, what to say, had led to collapses of many acquisitions.
Yeah, see, the thing is, what might happen is, you might find yourself with a newly acquired company, and if some of the talented employees from that firm leave, you might find yourself with a firm where there's not enough management talent to handle that firm. So you might have to ask some of your own personnel to go and handle that firm, and then that might weaken your organization. In fact, I would say that you have to come up with a retention plan, an HR strategy right at the due diligence stage, or even the target selection stage itself, right in the beginning. Otherwise, you will have serious problems during integration. Now, with regard to what I was saying earlier, let me also add a few things. See, if you look at the Asian context, many of the firms originally started as family-run entities, whether it is Reliance in India, or the Chaebols of Korea, or Matsushita, or Mitsubishi in Japan. They all started as family-run firms, and they have since grown and become publicly traded entities. Okay, whereas in the West, the situation is a little different. So that's perhaps the reason why you find more conglomerates in Asia rather than in the US or in Europe. One of the examples in the US is Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company. One of the few examples where a conglomerate has been truly successful. I mean, if you look at the business portfolio of Berkshire Hathaway, they are into so many businesses. There's an insurance business, there is a cigar company, a candy company, a jewelry company, completely unrelated, but somehow this company has been able to generate fantastic returns year after year. Perhaps it has something to do with Mr. Buffett's superior investment acumen. Okay, but the thing is, so it is very important to consider the question of fit. And sometimes companies make the erroneous assumption that just because you're good at something, your competency will stretch into something, you'll be able to be very good at something. It's kind of a sort of an inflated view of your own capabilities, right? And that is the problem. And eventually it takes some time for you to realize just because you're good at what you're doing doesn't mean that those competencies will apply in something that is completely unrelated to your own business. And assessing synergies is very important. Okay, and then it's always better to be quite conservative when it comes to assessing synergies. But what happens sometimes is, like I said earlier, if the CEO says, "Why don't we go ahead and acquire this company X?" Okay, the senior management who are responsible for the crunching the numbers, they tend to come up with synergy estimates which support the CEO's viewpoint, while ignoring the ground realities and the difficulties in achieving those synergies. So that is a problem. Third reason why is overvaluation. Okay, this is also known as, sometimes known as winner's curse. Okay, you might end up being, overpaying for the acquisition. You're not doing your due diligence properly, and so on. So this is the third reason why acquisitions fail. Poor negotiation strategies. Okay. Now, see, the thing is, the third point I've listed here, not knowing what is negotiable and what is non-negotiable. See, post-acquisition, ideally what sort of company you should acquire. You identify your strengths and weaknesses, you meaning the acquiring firm. You look for companies that will be a good complement to your own strengths and weaknesses. So, if your weaknesses can be offset by the strengths of the acquired firm, that is the perfect scenario, right? But then, what happens sometimes is that during the negotiation phase, you end up giving in on issues that weaken the acquiring firm. So, ultimately, the company ends up being weaker than what after the acquisition than what it was before. Classic example of a failure is the Daimler-Chrysler deal. Okay? Now, you probably know that Daimler paid nearly about $36 or $39 billion to acquire Chrysler, and recently they sold it for less than $2 billion. So you can imagine the amount of value destruction that took place. Okay. Now, what happened in this particular case? What happened was there was first a cultural conflict between Daimler and Chrysler. And as a result of that, it was supposed to be quote unquote a marriage of equals, but it didn't work out that way. So a lot of talented employees of Chrysler left. Goes back to your point about HR. Now what happened was Daimler found itself with a multinational company with revenues running into several billions with not enough management talent to run the company. So they had to, remove some key executives from the Daimler division and put them in Chrysler. They ended up weakening Daimler. And as a result of it, Mercedes-Benz brand got diluted. And they started experiencing serious quality problems. So that is why, unless you make appropriate plans well in advance, you could end up taking your eyes off the ball, and then that could result in your core products being, the brand image being affected, and value destruction eventually taking place. Okay. And also during the negotiation phase, it is critically important for you to know what is the absolute maximum you should be willing to pay. In fact, that is the reason why in the post-break session, I'm going to walk you through a valuation exercise where you actually determine what maximum is the stock price that the target company is worth, and what should be your opening bid, and so that you can know what is the range, negotiating range. So you've got to be very clear about that, and you should know when to walk away and without looking back. Okay, that's critically important. So, and finally, no integration plan. In fact, large number of acquisitions fail during the integration phase. All right. Now, if you want to really make a success of any acquisition, right in the beginning, during the due diligence stage itself, you have to decide what type of integration you want to adopt. What do I mean by that? That means, supposing the target company has a very strong brand, it's a well-run company, you should adopt what is called a preservation strategy. That means you don't try to do a full-scale merger. You let them, let the target company's management run the show, but you exercise some financial controls and so on. But let them do their own thing. Because if you try to mess around with that company, it is going to result in the profitability of the company going down, the brand value going down, and so on. That's a preservation approach. But in some cases, if the company is poorly run, you might have to go in for full-scale absorption. That means you might have to apply your processes and systems quickly to the target company so that you can try to turn around the company. So that is why you have to decide what type of integration is appropriate. In the case of Eicher acquisition, TAFE decided to adopt the preservation approach. That is, hands-off approach. The CFO of TAFE happens to be the CFO of Eicher division also. But beyond that, they have not really, tinkered too much with the business model of Eicher. Right? So, alright. So, let's look at this particular scenario. What was the factors that propelled this deal? This happened in 2005. What are the things that happened in the industry which made this deal sort of a requirement for TAFE? Okay. See, the type of business, some of you may be familiar with the tractor business, it's a cyclical business. Alright, and so there were some, and also there was a fear, that Mahindra is the number one tractor maker in India. So TAFE had this fear that if they let go of Eicher, then M&M would grab Eicher. That would really put TAFE at a disadvantage. Okay. So, and TAFE, as you know, is not only in the tractor business, they also do some auto component stuff. And so, since this acquisition took place, the combined revenue has been close to $1 billion, and they have been expanding their market presence overseas into both in North America as well as in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia and so forth. Now take a look at this diagram. Now what you see here is that TAFE had a good presence in this segment, that is the 31 to 40 horsepower tractor market. Okay? But the problem for them was M&M had 27% of the market share in that segment, in the area where they were strong. So they were competing head to head with M&M, right? But then look at this segment. In this segment, the under 30 horsepower, they had only 6%. M&M had a commanding presence. Whereas Aisha had 21% market share. So now, what was the reason why this under 30 horsepower segment was becoming increasingly important? Because especially in the US, now there is a new breed of farmers who are called recreational farmers. They are not really professional farmers, but they have a farm, they like to do it as a hobby. So they were looking for small under 30 horsepower tractors, right? And in this segment, M&M was the market leader, and they didn't, TAFE didn't really have much of a presence. So what they were hoping was Aisha's significant market share in this segment will help them to cater to this growing market of recreational farmers overseas, right? And they were also hoping that they will be able to increase their presence in the 41 to 50 horsepower segment. Now, so in terms of the product portfolio, this deal makes sense, okay, in terms of the horsepower. But look at this. This is another reason why this deal has been so successful. Look at the areas where TAFE is strong. It's Western India, South India, and Assam. Aisha Tractors was predominantly strong in Northern India. Perfect fit. There was not hardly any overlapping of market share. So this deal made a lot of sense. Okay, so, alright, so why was this deal successful? There was a good geographical fit. But in addition to that, TAFE focused both on the revenue side and the cost side. Okay? What they did was, in terms of the revenue side initiatives, they wanted to increase the volume in the under 30 horsepower segment. So what they decided to do was to reduce the prices of their products in the under 30 horsepower segment in order to compete more effectively with Mahindra & Mahindra. Alright? And then they also wanted to increase volumes, prices and contribution in the greater than 30 horsepower segment where they already had a presence. They were hoping to ramp up that as well. Alright? And then the third segment that you saw in the diagram, which is 40 to 50 horsepower, they wanted to innovate. They wanted to, in fact, what I feel what TAFE has done is they have followed what I would call as a hybrid strategy. We talked about organic growth, we talked about inorganic growth. What they have done is they have followed a hybrid strategy. So they have grown through acquisitions like acquiring Aisha and so on. At the same time, they are focused on improving the technology of their existing products, innovating. So that is more of an organic strategy. So it has been an organic plus an inorganic strategy. Alright, and then they also bought the engines business of Aisha, and so they wanted to ramp up their revenues from that business as well. What about on the cost side? Okay, sourcing of materials, same business, economies of scale, we all know about that. And so these are some of the other cost side initiatives they undertook, which has been responsible for making this deal a success. And phased out integration process. As I